regions. We honor Norm's legacy today with a panel conversation about the criminal justice system here in Fargo-Moorhead, a community that he helped to build up through care and leadership and philanthropy. In recent history, I'm sure you've all noticed, the American criminal justice system has been at the center of political and cultural controversies. Issues have emerged around everything from use of force policies and practices to the impact of incarceration among minority communities. Even though many of these issues have been part of our national discourse and conversation, they have real-world impacts on the ground here in communities like Fargo-Moorhead. The voices you're going to hear from today intersect in various ways with that system. And the panel was designed so that we would have an opportunity to hear a variety of local perspectives on the challenges that we face, along with proposals for how to make the criminal justice system more effective and trustworthy. I want to begin with a word of gratitude for Eric Johnson, here to my left, who will not only moderate today's session, but was also integral in its design. Thank you for that, Eric. And then finally, this event is co-sponsored by Concordia's pre-law student group. And with great joy, I now turn the mic over to one of its student representatives, Grace Halverson, who will introduce the panelists. Thanks, Grace.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Grace Halverson, and I'm a sophomore here at Concordia studying political science and philosophy. And like Dr. Chan said, I am part of Concordia's Pre-Law Society, which is newly restarted this year, so we're super excited to be here. Super grateful for you all for being here, and to our panelists. So I get to introduce them. So closest to me is Mr. Eric Johnson, who is currently the Director of Alumni Relations here at Concordia, and he is a 1981 graduate, I believe, 1982. And he is a former naval defense attorney and both state and federal prosecutor. Next to Eric is Tony Barrett, who is a first year here at Concordia, also part of our pre-law society. The Honorable Judge Jade Rosenfelt, who is a 2005 graduate of Concordia. She sits on the 7th Judicial District Court in the state of Minnesota. Matur Alier is the Director of Equity and Inclusion at Moorhead Area Public Schools. And Mr. Brian Melton is the Clay County Attorney, and last on the end is Lieutenant Bill Ahlfeldt, who is the commander of the Fargo Police Department Specialized Services Unit. So another huge thank you to all of them for being here, and I'm so excited.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Grace. Let's before we dig into the hard topics, let's warm up with a little bit more background. Maybe each panelist, and we'll maybe start down at the end with Bill, can tell us a little bit about your background, just briefly. What brought you into the line of work that you're in, and what activates you? What's important about it in a way that fulfills you?
Definitely. Is this on? Hello. There we go. Definitely. Thank you very much, Eric, and thank you everybody for letting me come and have this conversation with you all today. We're talking about building trust, and this is a key part to that is communication. And so, Bill Offelt, I've been in law enforcement for 21 years. I've been at the Fargo Police Department almost that entire time. Been in just about every aspect of our agency, from patrol to internal affairs, is what it was called at the time, or professional accountability. I've been a member of our SWAT team for almost 20 years. I'm the current commander of that. Trained officers, patrol sergeant. I've done every aspect, investigations that you can think of in law enforcement. This is a calling for me. I think we all have that calling. I think some of us listen to it and some of us don't. But I listened to this calling. I actually tried to deny it when I was in college because I'm a political science with a history minor. I was going to be an attorney. I was really excited about doing that, but I was doing that. I was denying my calling to be in law enforcement, to be the enforcement arm of the criminal justice system. And I found that out. I followed my path through college. And that's what brings me here. I really feel that I think my role here is important in that not only providing that basic need to protect and serve, but also working with the community to educate the community on what we do. I think that's very important, especially at this time. And so that's what I see my role as, not only in law enforcement, but here today.
Good. Brian?
Brian Melton, class of 91 here at Concordia. After I graduated, I worked for a little bit. I thought I would go into business, and then I had a political science degree, also a business degree. Went up to law school at UND, graduated in 1997. While I was at school, I interned at the Clay County Attorney's Office, but also taking criminal classes. It was a calling. I don't know that I knew it at the time, but when I found it, it was something that just very much interested me. And then once getting into the office and seeing the important work that's done there, the helping of victims, the sense of safety and helping the community and helping work to protect the community are all things that really called to me. So after that, I clerked for a year with a judge, and then after 1998, I got my job with the county attorney's office, then ultimately became county attorney in 2007. So I've enjoyed over a 24-year career, all within Clay County and Clay County Attorney's Office and doing prosecution work, and definitely been very fulfilling.
What fulfills you, Brian? What motivates you to continue that work?
Well, I would just say, I mean, the fun part of it, if you will, is doing trials, of getting in court, being in there, mixing it up, if you will, with defense attorneys and seeing that side of things. So if you're just talking about that part that's interesting, exciting, but I think at the end of the day, when you're working with victims, and there's across the board. I mean, for me, I've done everything from domestic assault crimes to property crimes, traffic. I mean, there's an important piece to traffic crimes, the fulfilling piece that police are out there making sure that we're safe and we're sound. And so ultimately, as you work your way up and you do complex crime, I have a murder trial starting tomorrow. I have 57 witnesses that I'm going to call that I have to organize, and so that complex litigation becomes, I think, a bigger thing later on in life. But I think being able to work with victims, talk to those people, have them understand how the system works, the difficulties they're going to have to work through, understanding that it can go slow, all those things, and navigate them through is definitely fulfilling.
Mentor.
Thank you. I am Matur Alier. I was born in South Sudan during the Civil War. At 7 years old, I ended up in a refugee orphanage camp there, spent 10 years, and I was lucky I came to America 2006. I graduated high school, went to Penn State University, studied biology. I have a bachelor's in biology. Did wanted to go to med school and then find out it wasn't for me. So I ended up getting a job, got a job here as a social worker. I moved to this community and got another job as a director of equity and inclusion, and I'm getting my master's from MSUM, and I'm doing my doctorates in educational leadership. And what brought my day job, I'm currently the director of equity and inclusion with Moorhead Public School, and it's pretty much fulfilling that every day I get to wake up and look at what are the barriers that are stopping our student from succeeding, and how can I upset those? Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Now, old habits die hard, so I want to say Judge, but is it okay if we call you Jade for this morning?
Please.
Okay, Jade, go ahead and tell us a little bit about your background.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Jade Rosenfelt, and I grew up, 12 blocks from where we're sitting right now. Went to school in Moorhead, and my path, and I'm going to share a little something personal with you, but it's ultimately what led me to my career, which is I was the victim of a very serious crime. And it was prosecuted by the Clay County Attorney's Office when I was a senior in high school. And it gave me a front seat to the criminal justice system and how it works, what's good, what's bad, what works, what doesn't work. And of course, it motivated me. I watched the prosecutor prosecute the person who committed the crime, and ultimately that person went to prison. And I was motivated, and I saw the work and the difference that one person could make in my life. And so that's what motivated me to go to law school. When I got to law school, and then I went to Concordia, of course, and I graduated with a social work degree. I bounced around. I took a biology course. Nope, not for me. Took accounting, not for me. I found social work, and it was immediately what I enjoyed. It was making a difference. It was helping others. It was finding a way to make a change. And so I figured if I didn't do well in law school. So if that didn't pan out, I could be in the social work profession. I didn't know what you did with a political science degree. So then I went to law school. And while at law school, I interned with the Clay County Attorney's Office, with Mr. Melton's office, and enjoyed that immensely. But ultimately, when I graduated, there wasn't an opening in that office, government job. There just wasn't an opening. So I ended up taking a position with the Vogel Law Firm in Fargo-Moorhead. And surprising to everyone, including myself, ended up doing criminal defense work, which really was the opposite of what I started out thinking I was going to do. And it really combined my undergrad social work degree with my knowledge of the legal justice system. And so I worked with individuals for 12 years when they were charged with crimes, all the way from traffic offenses to very, very serious offenses. Got to try a number of cases. I practiced in state and federal court. And then ultimately there was an opening to take the bench here in Clay County 3 years ago. And I applied and was appointed by Governor Walz. And I've been serving as a judge for the last 3 years. I am motivated every single day by trying to affect some change, whether that means one person getting themselves clean and sober, whether that means that we change an entire system of how something is done. Every day I want to make a difference, whether, like I said, whether it's individual or micro or macro level. I'm also incredibly motivated by educating people about our judicial system and how it works. I think we can have some really great conversations about how the system works, but unfortunately, I don't know that many people understand how it works. So we need to make sure that we get those doors opened and we teach how it works so that we can make improvements.
Thanks, Jade. Tony.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tony. I'm a student here at Concordia, class of 2026. I'm studying political science.
I don't know what you're going to do with it.
Yeah,
Yeah, everybody, you got to go to law school.
gotta go to law school. Yeah, I'm majoring in
You
political.
don't have to.
I'm majoring in political science, environmental studies with a concentration in environmental policy, Spanish, and music. So I love sleeping. And I'm also a member of the Pre-Law Society here with Grace, and I've always been, really interested in the political systems here in the United States and how they're applied on the daily level. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Thanks, Tony. Well, I'm going to go off script right away and go back to Jade for a first question, and everybody else is invited to jump in. But when we talk about building a trustworthy community and creating trustworthy values within the criminal justice system, I think it's sometimes, for outside observers, hard to imagine a panel that includes law enforcement, prosecution, Sudanese, African-American worker in diversity, equity, and inclusion, former victim, former defense counsel, judge, student, and whatever I represent. But all of us up here together already in community, and I think, from our earlier conversations as we prepared, a place of trust. And I think a question that somebody who hasn't been in the system might want to say is, how can you be a defense attorney and have been a victim? And how do those different roles interact together in terms of trust between law enforcement and the bench, law enforcement and defense, prosecution, community, and us as the public? But especially that idea of how do you fit into this if you come from one space?
Right. I think that critical to understanding the way our system works is that there are roles within that system. And everyone plays a role. And if you understand everyone's role and what they're trying to accomplish, and you respect their role, then we can all work together. Even though we might be looking at different things, but if we can work together in respectful ways and understand what each is trying to accomplish, it works. As someone who was the victim of a crime, I saw the way the system worked, and it worked in my case, right? The individual was prosecuted, he was sent to prison, and so I felt a sense of justice. I got my day in court, so to speak. But I also observed all the roles that everyone else played. He had an attorney that was there representing him. There was obviously a judge that had the sentence, law enforcement who had investigated the case originally. When I went to practice and could really appreciate how the defense attorney had to play the role of representing that individual, and that there was different sides to every case, and that he was going to go in there and advocate for his position, and the prosecutor was going to advocate for their position, that it really, the system worked because everyone did their role. It doesn't work if we don't have every single role playing at the same time. So I don't know if I'm answering the question very well, but also, I understand the important piece that you have to have for filling these roles. And I always said, for all lawyers, they should be a prosecutor and a defense attorney. Everyone should be required to be on both sides, because when you go to law school, you learn how to argue both sides, okay? You're supposed to be able to see both sides of the case. You're supposed to be able to make both arguments. And if you're so entrenched in one of those roles in our system, and you're not recognizing that this is a role you're doing, it's a job that you're doing, then sometimes that's when the system fails as well. So I think it's important to understand and all understand that we all play a role.
Can I just add too?
Oh, please.
Exactly what Jade says, but I think everybody should always recognize that every individual has a right to access the courts, to just what as Jade was saying, to provide that side, and sometimes somebody may not be as articulate as somebody else. So the idea that a person's rights are protected and you have the best. I always appreciate, a good defense attorney is the person who's going to make sure that person's rights are fully protected. As an officer of the court, I too will make sure that their rights are protected. But ultimately, I know if I've convicted somebody, their rights have been protected, their voice has been heard, whatever ultimately is the outcome of that, say, jury trial or in front of the judge. Those rights, the full constitutional rights that you have and are presumed to have been protected. So, just what Jade's saying, that role that defense attorney is vital. So you do need to have that. You do need to know both sides. To know your case and be a good prosecutor, you better know what the defense attorney is doing.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to jump in on that, or in terms of those sort of not personal, but professional relationships across the system?
Definitely, and Jade and I, we were just talking before this about how, a lot of people think that there's some type of adversarial thing between defense and law enforcement. And it's really the exact opposite. We want to see people represented. We want to see people defended. It is their right. And I've always seen it as a little bit of a check and balance, how the system works. On maybe a smaller scale than the checks and balance of, executive, legislative, judicial. But defense, prosecutor, police, we all learn from what each other does, and if there's some unintentional thing missed, some unintentional mistake that is happening and it's caught by either defense or prosecutor or even law enforcement in some cases, we can learn from that and do a better job next time. And so I see all of these roles play out as a check and a balance in many ways, and I've learned over the years when things have been taken to court or when I've had meetings prior to trials or other things I might have been involved in, I've learned how to do my job better through that process. And so that's how I've always seen it, not only someone being defended, but a learning process, a check and a balance where we can learn from it.
Let me take it back up again, and we'll back the camera back a little bit from these more sort of personal, professional relationships, and just acknowledge, as Dr. Chan did, that confidence, in the criminal justice system, in polls, isn't super high at the moment. It hasn't polled very much better than big business, television, news, Congress. Oh my gosh. When we're down at the level of Congress, that's bad. So confidence and trust in the criminal justice system seems to have wavered a bit in the past few years. So I'm just wondering, from the perspectives that you represent, what can be done, do you think, to increase trust? And maybe that's messaging, but maybe that's changing ways of working and behaving within the system. So any ideas about that? That's just a very simple question, and we've got like 5 minutes. Go.
Well, I can start too. I think as we were talking about, I mean, sometimes some of that confidence piece, just like as we had a lot of difficulties in law enforcement, I think some of that has come towards the judicial system where some people lose confidence. But I think that a lot of it can be or should be about education. And I would want to be here on the panel just trying to convince folks that your judicial system is strong. It is good. There is good checks and balances between, just as you were even saying, between the prosecution, between the defense, between the judiciary. Sometimes I think what, unfortunately, I think gets skewed, whether today because of multimedia, spreading things across the internet. I mean, if you read, I was just looking as I was getting prepared. If one website would say that we have 25 to 30,000 people incarcerated in Minnesota, making you believe that there's people in prison at that level of 25,000, when in fact it's about 7,500 people that are in prison. So if you look at the population, 5.7 million people, and we're 0.1% that are ultimately in prison, which there's a lot of things that can be improved, that can be looked at, can be studied. Some of our population minority pieces, need to be looked at and corrected. But ultimately, the system is working. And so that's some of the things I would want to talk about. If you look at Minnesota, the fact that we have determinate sentencing, it means that somebody in Moorhead that does a theft is going to be treated the same way as a person down in Minneapolis that does a theft, or up in Thief River Falls. I mean, that is a good thing, potentially, compared to non-determinate, where just the judge is deciding whether a person should or shouldn't go to prison. So our system, at least if you're looking at the state and what Minnesota's doing, is very good and strong.
Yeah, Mentor.
Well, thank you. I think this is your question have two parts into it: confidence and trust. I have never been in trouble here in this country, and I hope to stay that way. But when I look at the justice system itself, look at the numbers of the people in prisons, 80% of it make up the number of minorities. Mm-hmm. And that we have zero trust in the system. Mm-hmm. I could feel confident that I know 90% of Fargo police forces. Does it mean I can do anything wrong? No. To me, I can be at the wrong place at the wrong time and be criminalized. And look at our cities and what are the locations where they're sending the police to patrol. And these are the places where minority people or minority people lived, or where most of the criminal occur. So looking at that justice system, I'm sitting here, everything sounds good and well, but look at the number of the people that have been put away.
Right.
Most of them look like me.
Right.
So I have zero trust in the system.
Right. So can I ask, following on that very clear call and observation, what has been your experience in your position working with the criminal justice system in what we can do together to be better?
I think we need to engage more, look more deeper into these cases.
Right.
Like when I get pulled over, I might get nervous because I probably don't trust police a lot, and that will create another suspicions and why is he acting this way. I don't do that anymore, knowing that I have confidence that I know the people in the community that I lived in right now. But somebody of new, coming from a different places where they have seen a lot and a lot of bad things happen to the people that look like them, they might act differently, and that trigger more. And I think it's a conversation. What can we do to start? Because everything within justice system is start with a police post. They'll cut you, take you through the justice system to where you end up being put away. at what kind of training can we provide our police forces to connect with the people that don't look like them. And if you look at the police post department, it's middle-aged white male. And what are the professional training that we can give them to connect them to the people that don't look or act like them?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Bill, you looked like you had some ideas too about the broad question, or maybe as well about the question related to communities of color.
So definitely, you know, and really this is something that we could sit here and spend all afternoon talking about in all reality, because it's a systematic thing. We're all up here representing part of the system, a specific part of the system. And so, I mean, there's many roads we could go down here, but in building trust, I mean, it's not simple, but in some ways it should be. It's communication, it's education, it's listening to both sides. It's not polarizing. It's coming in a meeting in the middle, finding a place that we can compromise, finding a place that works well for everyone. Is treating people with respect, and in that listening, in that communication, that's where we find ways to do that. And one thing that I'm really proud of our agency, and I sit up here representing the Fargo, North Dakota Police Department. I'm sitting in Moorhead, Minnesota, and so I can speak for my agency. I'm proud of what we have done. I'm proud of the fact that we're building ways and areas for people to communicate. We're wanting to listen to our minority partners and our minority individuals in the city of Fargo, and trying to work at building that trust. And that's just one side of the law enforcement side, what we're trying to do. But you know, there are many things within the criminal justice system that I think it's overloaded in many ways, and it's not based on crime, but it's based on what we're expected to work with and deal with. Mental health has a huge role in this, where individuals with mental health are going to jail and prison, and are we taking that opportunity to help them? Are we taking the opportunity to help people that are addicted? Are we taking the opportunity of where someone might be arrested, and then we identify what the problem is, what's causing that issue, the underlying problem being mental health, addiction, and then are we using that to triage that and try to help those individuals? That's a whole nother route or road we could go down. But the basic question of building trust is treating people with respect, listening to others, educating. And I really do believe training, looking at once we figure out what new training we need and what else we need to do, whether it's implicit bias training or some of these other things that are being implemented, we need to go down that road. And then we need to let people know we're doing that, because that's a huge piece of it. I think there are many things being done in law enforcement, many things being done in the criminal justice system that our public doesn't know about, because communication is so difficult right now. People listen to what they want to listen to. They're able to mold what they listen to through social media and control that. And so there are a lot of things we could touch on here that might be systematically wrong that we could fix. But trust, I think, is simple, and then we go from there.
Tony, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I think building off of the comments earlier, when we look at the interaction of systems across the United States, I think it's important to acknowledge that trust can be built on the local level with talks like these and communication within the within your respective areas. But I think when we look at like these national poll numbers, I don't think there's ever been a national news story of police officer does his job, nothing goes wrong, and everybody had a great day. We only see kind of the
Doesn't sell, does it?
Doesn't sell, yeah. I think we really only see the really negative perceptions of it, and I think that building that national trust is a more complex and nuanced issue than some of the local trust.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we could talk for hours and hours on this subject, but education about the criminal justice system, you would be so surprised. We bring in jurors almost every Tuesday, and everyone has a look of dread on their face, okay? It's very apparent. Nobody wants to be there. With a few exceptions. There's sometimes some folks who are really excited.
And generally, we don't want them on the jury.
Right, yep, we don't want them.
That's another panel discussion.
Yes. And I tell everyone, I give everyone the spiel. All right, I know some of you don't want to be here. I know some of you have other conflicts, and this is a really stressful time of the year for you, but please understand this is such a critical part of our system. Our system that is good. It is not perfect, but it is good, and it is far better than many other systems. But we need you in order to make this system work. And the folks who serve as jurors, who are selected and ultimately serve as jurors, when they are polled afterwards, they always tell us they learned so much about how the system worked and that they had no idea that's how the system worked, as opposed to 48 hours on television, right? Or Dateline or whatever it might be. So, and that is individuals often in their 50s and 60s and 70s, right? So I think a huge part of what we have to do is we have to educate about how the system works. We have to get to the youth. You know, I'm rarely asked to go into a school and talk to individuals, talk to students about how the system works, but we do have classes from Moorhead High that come and watch court. There is nothing more powerful than actually sitting in the courtroom and watching an entire day's worth of court and seeing what comes through our doors. I think people are surprised. I don't want to throw my mother-in-law under the bus, but I think she would say, she's like, you have court all day? All day, every day, all right? I mean, there are enough cases. It's not just the 5 cases you read about in the newspaper every day, right? So come in and see the work that's being done. There's a lot of work being done. It's really overloaded in many, many ways. Also, our system is not focused on preventing people from entering the system. Our system's focus has always been, what do we do after they get in? How do we punish them? How do we rehabilitate them? What do we do? We have to change that focus. We have to go uphill. Why did they fall in the river in the first place, right? How do we get them from not entering the system? And I don't have the answer to that, but that, for me, has always been the key. How do we get to the populations that need us most, put the supports in place so that they never have to step foot in a courtroom? That we have to be better about focusing on that.
I'd like to go back. Thank you, Jade. I'd like to go back to the relationship between minority communities and the criminal justice system for sort of a secondary question to what Matur was talking about earlier, with that sense of lack of confidence and trust at being sucked into the system in some way as being charged with a crime and what that might experience might be like. We had a conversation in preparation for this day where we talked a little bit about the interaction between communities of color and law enforcement when they're the victims, right? Could you say a few words about what that's like for communities that may not feel trust, or perhaps from their countries of origin, for new Americans not trusting law enforcement, or the additional lack of trust that might come from being a person of color in the United States system? But we talked a little bit about that, so that the impact of a lack of trust is not just on what could happen to me if I'm charged with a crime, but if I'm a victim of a crime and I don't feel confidence or trust, what happens then?
That's a good follow-up question. And looking at it and where I came from, most of the countries of immigrants, so if you see a police get sent to your home, either that you will never see that person again. You will never see that person in your family again. And it creates that distress. And coming here, we don't want to interact with the police at any level. So though that trust is not there from the country of origin. And if you notice that most of the people coming to this country are fleeing war or prosecution, or they have to go through a lot of hoops to get here. And to my experience living in Fargo, I have seen a lot of good polices. I remember one time Mr. Benz stopped at my house and play snow with my kids while I came in from walk and just greet him, and we hang out and went back in. And coming back in, one of my kids, 6-year-old, asked me, why they always say the police are bad. I said, depend on who you interact with. And I think all Fargo police are good. That's my own experience. But looking at the reason I said earlier that there's no trust is looking at the number of the people and the effects it leave behind. Say one parent is put to prison, live everything with one parent to tackle everything and have a kid that is missing a family member at the dinner table every night and have to think and think and think. And what are the effects? Is it financial impact or downward mobility with economic? So I think there's a lot that need to be looked at. And when they laid out, once you're in the system and you laid out, it's hard for you to get a job. It's hard for you to be trusted by anybody, even when you're wrongly convicted. So the effect of it is not, it doesn't just stay there. It follows you through the rest of your life. And that's something that need a lot of attention.
Yeah. I mean, it's ironic that lack of trust. We think of the explosive loss of confidence and trust in the wake of George Floyd and the effect that it has on this feeling of, if I'm caught into the system, what will happen to me? And I'm not sure if I'm a victim, whether I can participate in the system. So it's a double. It's a double whammy. It just crushes people from both sides.
Yeah, because you'll lose your job and maybe lose your house.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
family too.
Yeah. Brian, you wanted to jump in?
I only wanted to say, I think one thing that's been done well over the last probably 10 years or so, that communication piece, maybe not talking just necessarily minority, but new Americans, people that speak different language. The court system is very good about interpreter services, both for that defendant so that they are hearing and understanding what's happening to them and understand what they're charged with, those kind of things. But then also the victims, that they can, come in and get services and understand it, get documents that are in their own language. I think Minnesota's been on the forefront of getting those things done, so they can, understand what a protective order is and those kind of things in a person's language. So if they need that, that they're not as distrustful of what's happening, they can understand that and read that in their own language. So those are some good things that I think Minnesota has tried to do to make sure that at least it helps, because of that exact thing, where if they're distrustful of the whole system or what they've come from, if they believe they're in court and that judge, and I think what's difficult too, though, then family members, have to maybe using their own family to try to interpret that. That's some of that difficulty still, but at least a certain amount of people that main victim can come to an understanding of that kind of thing.
Well, and I'm sure that Bill has experienced this, and you, Brian, and Jade, when you were representing clients, and I know I experienced it in my career, when the distrust of the system runs so deep, it becomes increasingly difficult to intervene in a positive way, because people are unwilling to trust enough to be a witness, either for the defense or for the state, to participate and to seek services, to seek interventions. I mean, that lack of trust runs so deep that even for the things that might turn out to be good, it's hard to get people involved. Yeah.
I will just say, yes, Minnesota has done, we have interpreter services, we have documents in almost every language that you can imagine. There are many dialects, so we are always looking for interpreters of different dialects. But as a judge, my job, and I think anyone who serves in a professional capacity, the stories are so important. My day is case after case after case. But when I have an individual that comes in and I've read in there that they're a new American, or they, we're in a refugee camp, I want to know more. Okay, that story is critical to understanding how we got to where we are today in my courtroom. And as a society, we've just stopped asking that question. We've stopped asking, what is your story? How did we get here? And I think that's important. We have to press the pause button and take a little bit more time and learn about an individual's background and history. Their shoplifting case is not the same as the 32-year-old female mom who shoplifted because she left something under her car. Who knows? They're all different cases. We want to know the stories. So I think that that's important. It's important that as a judge, I make everyone feel as though they can speak in my courtroom, that they have a voice, that I will listen to what they have to say. We have to build those inlets. We have to diversify the system as well. I mean, we can't just have white males as the police officers and as the lawyers and as the judges, and that's really important to making it so that individuals walk into a courtroom and they see someone like themselves in the courtroom. I hope I'm a role model to a young female who says, "Oh, you could be a judge." I never in a million years thought I could be a judge. That wasn't something that I saw in my future. So we have to work towards creating more diversity in these roles as well. I think that's critical.
I think thank you, Judge. I think this is a good place to pause a little and invite questions from the audience. And I think our first question is going to come from Grace Halverson from our pre-law group. Grace?
All right, so we've talked about a lot of broader topics, but Pre-Law Society is really curious about what makes the criminal justice system in Fargo-Moorhead unique.
I guess I'll start with this one. I think, especially being an area with a lot of schools and universities, I think we see a lot of young people being part of and impacted by the system. And I think just having that younger generation who really shows that they're passionate about these issues, especially in voting in the recent midterms. A lot of young people are really concerned about these issues, and I think that the system, especially here, is so important because it's around all these young people. And yeah.
Other ideas on that? Bill?
Yeah. So this is one thing that I'm glad you asked this question. And looking at it from a Fargo Police Department side, for years, I really think that we have tried to be ahead of the game, tried to build trust in the community. And what really is hard to overcome is something like the murder of George Floyd, because that was something that a police officer did 250 miles away that affected us in law enforcement, a law enforcement agency that we don't have all the right answers. We didn't do everything right, but we were trying very hard to do the right thing, and I think we're successful in many ways. Cultural liaison officer for 20 plus years, community trust officers, building trust in the community with new American minority youth, underprivileged youth, and many other facets of our community. All of those things were in place pre-George Floyd, pre this discussion, and we were doing things, I think, very well. I hated what happened to George Floyd, and it kicked us back 2-3 years in our progression. We didn't lose it. It stopped our forward progression. And what I can say, what I think is unique about, at least on the Fargo side of the river, the Fargo Police Department, I know that our Clay County partners in law enforcement are doing the same things, is what we've tried to do already to build trust and what we are continuing to try to do. You don't see this in a lot of agencies to the same level that we're doing it locally in the metro throughout the country. I can say that with confidence because I've traveled all over the country to different events, different trainings, different things that I might have been involved in. And I see what places are doing. I hear what people are doing and law enforcement agencies are doing. And I think what really makes our agency in the metro unique is what we have been trying to do and continue to try to do to build trust in the community, to try to divert some of these things, especially the juveniles, who are getting charged with crimes that probably could be dealt with education. Juvenile diversion is a huge thing that we're trying to do. Education, when new Americans come here, one thing that can get in front of what Mature was talking about is educating on what law enforcement is in the United States. I've personally experienced what he's talking about from the law enforcement side, where people from another country who are new to America were begging me not to shoot their husband because they were having an argument. Nothing that was even illegal, just two people having an argument, begging me not to shoot their husband. Education can get in front of that, where we say in America this doesn't happen. And so I think that that's what, at least from a law enforcement perspective, it's not just Fargo, it's Moorhead, it's Clay County, it's Cass County, striving to do these same things on the law enforcement arm of things. So I think that makes us unique.
Yeah. Any other ideas there? And by the way, while Matur's going to jump in, if you have a question, please feel free to come up to the microphone. Go ahead, Matur.
Yeah, I have lived in two different cities, like Philadelphia and Fargo here, and doing the comparison, I think Fargo is greater, more safer, and the justice system is way better than over there. And the second bill here, with the work that Fargo police have been doing, I know, and I have seen it because my kid participates in their swimming. They take swimming classes with our police force, and I know many of other New American church in our church and within the communities that have utilized that. And I think it had built that connection and trust in the relationship. And you guys should not stop. You should continue to do what you can.
Keep doing it, yeah.
Keep doing it.
Yeah.
Whatever happened in Minneapolis, it was just the tip of iceberg on some of the polices that sign up for a bad reason.
Can I just also say, I think one thing that we've done better, whether it's here at Fargo-Moorhead, but also just over time, and Bill started talking about recognizing the importance of the mental health piece, where we're not criminalizing as much people with mental health issues, that training, so the police officers, when they're interacting with them, doesn't continue the criminal piece, or if they're in the system, recognizing that and looking at whether that's more commitment or something else, and also addiction issues. Trying to look at the idea of less criminalizing the person that's addicted versus trying to have that person that's accountable, that's preying on the addicted, and trying to get those people off the street so they're not selling drugs to the people that are addicted, and then trying to help those people get treatment, back to understanding their role in society. And then obviously one of the things that's good about the community, we're just one part of the community, but our community is good and strong in that, helping people overcome a lot of those other barriers, poverty, other things, and again, that may lead to addiction that accounts for a large portion of our crime. So those are, I think, things that we're doing very well or continue to work well, and I think society is recognizing it better. So we're doing better, we just need to keep doing that.
So it looks like we have as many as 3 questions, so come on up and ask your question. And we are, and another question over there. We're coming up hard against the time too, so come on up and let's have your question, and we'll be expeditious. We'll do well.
Hi, I wanted to particularly thank you for lifting up mental health as something that the police are asked to carry, and that's not great for either the police or for people going through mental health crises, and that we should have more social workers and people with social work training in the criminal justice system. And I want to, if you'll pardon me, share why I can't trust the system, and that is because I lost a close relative last year who was home alone having a mental health crisis and was considering injuring himself. And the 911 call resulted in the police coming to the house before the ambulance, and they charged in yelling, and within a minute they had pepper sprayed him and shot him, and he died in his own bedroom. And there's no accountability. There's an investigation by the Attorney General of the state of New Jersey, but they have said that he will not be charged because of civil immunity, or what is it? And he hasn't even been fired from the department. And our family's lawyer has told us that even if he were fired from the department, it wouldn't matter because he could go be a police officer anywhere else. And so the ideals are strong. The ways that you're talking about the system sound right to me. And when the system isn't working, where is the accountability? Where is the pushback from good cops against cops who do harm? When you are the victim of the system, how does the system respond? It seems like some people get criminalized and you can't get rid of that. But cops, once they've been elevated to being the good guys, there is no touching that no matter what the harm they do. So, can you talk about accountability and how you approach people who are not behaving in the system as you wish?
Well, I think I'll address that. First of all, I'm very sorry for your loss and sorry that that happened to you. And another very good example of how something that happened in New Jersey, eyewear, and I will accept, not responsibility, but I'll accept answering the question. I can only answer it from what I know here. And I'm not going to say whether or not that officer did the right or the wrong thing, because I don't know the full version of it or everything that happened. But what I can say is this: how we're going to build trust through something like that is that agency, that jurisdiction, the individuals that made those decisions have to be very transparent in what they did, why they did it. And one of the major barriers that stops us building trust quickly in situations like this are the parameters put on what we can and cannot release for information, and when we can and cannot release it. If it's a continuing investigation, they can't tell you everything that happened, or they can't tell me or any of us everything that happened until it's done, or else they jeopardize due process and everything for not only the officer, but they could jeopardize things for the family. And so that's what really puts a kind of an anchor on this thing. That can take years. And in those years, you're now sitting there saying, well, what happened and why did this happen and why did this officer do that and, you know, why is my friend dead? All very justified questions. And so in my opinion, we have to, there's a couple things here. We have to be as transparent as possible where we're at as much as we can say. And then we also have to, and it's very hard to say, but be patient and let the process work, which is very hard to say for someone who's grieving and has lost a friend or a loved one. And that's really the best I can give right now. Now, on the mental health piece side of things that you're talking about, there have been, in my 20 years in law enforcement, there has been an extreme change in procedure on how we handle individuals who are suicidal. Looking at something at case value, we cannot use lethal force against someone to stop them from killing themselves. That doesn't make any sense. And many times law enforcement, when I first started, we have to go in and stop this person from hurting themselves, and then they would hurt themselves, or they would try to hurt us, and then we would use lethal force. And there's been an extreme change or switch in law enforcement in the last 5 years on how law enforcement responds to individuals experiencing a mental health crisis, especially suicidal thoughts. And so that change is sometimes we just let them be. If they're not going to harm anyone else, if there's no inclination that they're going to harm anyone else, oftentimes we'll let them be. And so I don't know this total specifics. I don't want to talk specifically about that situation, but I can tell you that's where we are going on the law enforcement side of things. At the national level, National Tactical Officers Association, who oversees SWAT teams for the entire United States and sets different priorities and different rules to operate by, are saying that now. And so very sorry that happened. That's the best I can answer.
I know we have other questions, but I have to just chime in for one moment because the mental health piece is so important here. And our law enforcement have been put in a catch-22 when it comes to mental health, okay? there has been a huge shift in understanding that we have a mental health crisis and that people are often calling law enforcement when they are in a mental health crisis. But our system is not equipped to deal with mental health, all right? So law enforcement respond, there are very, very limited options of what to do with that person. And I'm not excusing law enforcement behavior at all. I'm just saying our system needs to get better about having a solution for someone who's in a mental health crisis and not committing a crime of any kind, but they're in a crisis and they need help. Right now, the emergency room is often the solution, all right? And they go to the emergency room and if they're a danger to themselves or others, they're put on a 72-hour hold. And then they are released. And they're given a card that says, here's an appointment with a therapist in 4 to 6 weeks. That's what our system consists of right now. Our system is broken for treating mental health. And so we have too many individuals that are entering our criminal justice system because there isn't another solution for where to bring those individuals. So if you're a part of that endeavor to make that change, in my opinion, and I let the others say if they agree or disagree, but that is where we need help. We need mental health facilities that can help these individuals.
Thank you. I think I'm going to make a command decision. We started a little late, so we're going to go a little longer, Dr. Chan. Okay, one more question. So whoever, you guys battle it out for one more question. You know, and as Lonnie is approaching the microphone, I would say, you know, we know in the last 3 or 4 years in the Twin Cities, there's been at least 3 different police-involved homicides or killings that have involved prosecution, George Floyd most notably, but at least 2 others that I can think of in my mind that involved prosecution. And I also know that we are shifting, or there have been some shifts away from taking police-involved shootings and other sorts of misbehavior to a grand jury, which, you know, there's some discussion about the lack of transparency that relates to grand juries. Now, there's a reason that grand juries meet in secret, and that's a whole other longer discussion. But when we talk about transparency in the system, if law enforcement cases are brought to a grand jury where there isn't a transcript or what have you, there can be claims that somehow it was manipulated. So there are shifts that are happening in jurisdictions in the Minnesota and other parts of the country related to police misconduct. Lonnie.
Thank you, Eric. I am so fortunate to be accompanied by an extraordinary nonprofit leadership course comprised of freshmen. And so we have been investigating local, national, and international nonprofits. And so my question is, how is your work leveraging the incredible reservoir of nonprofit organizations in our community? And do you have a story?
Looks like Bill does. Go.
I do have a story. So 2014, there was a task force, President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing, that was put into place by President Obama. And it gave 6 pillars of how we can build trust in the community. And with that came grant money to fund law enforcement officers to be hired to do this. And our agency in 2015 received 2 police officers, grant money to fund 2 police officers. And I was a brand new lieutenant. I was given the opportunity to start what we called our Community Trust Officer Group. We're now called the Community Engagement Team. But we brought on 2 officers. Some of you had probably seen it, that we were fairly public, Officer Bloom and Niemeyer. And we started doing a lot of youth engagement, and that was what our mission was with New American, with minority youth in the Fargo-Moorhead area, really. And the swimming program that Matura was talking about is one of those initiatives that we had done. And your school, Concordia, was actually a partner in that they provided a swimming facility to run that programming out of. Part of that was a nonprofit, us working with the Dakota Medical Foundation, putting together the Badges of Unity Fund, in which we were taking community donations to work within our community with youth to build trust at that juvenile level and beyond. And we're now moving into, we're seeing that, okay, we're doing well with juveniles. We have a very established program. We now need to go into more of a young adult, even just general community engagement type level, and that's where that engagement team is shifting and still continuing that juvenile programming. So we were able to do fundraising through Dakota Medical Foundation, which is a nonprofit, and able to harness that, I think, as you said it, and use it to benefit not only Fargo, but the Fargo-Moorhead area. So it's almost like that question was made for me, but it wasn't. I had an answer right away. Thank you.
Jade or Mature, you both grabbed your microphone, so.
Well, I can just say we see nonprofits. We have a domestic violence court, we have a drug court, and we work hand in hand with nonprofits to serve those courts. So we're very fortunate to have the Rape and Abuse Crisis Center as a part of domestic violence court. We have a plethora of chemical dependency agencies that also work with the drug court to help the individuals, to serve them, come to court with them, help them navigate that process. So the continued efforts we can make to connect nonprofit work with the judicial system, I think, is incredibly important.
Can I just add, the Red River Children's Advocacy Center is an outstanding nonprofit. Please give. They're great. I mean, they're the.
Thank you, Brian. I'm on that board.
Yeah, that's right, and that's Eric's on the. I mean, they're the center that helps to allow children to have a safe place to come in and be able to, if they're comfortable with it, disclose if they've been abused. They're the center that helps us, that ultimately we have to prosecute. They've recorded that statement, and we use them, and we use that center to help those children be able to disclose, and ultimately, oftentimes then charge out criminal sexual assault cases. So that's just one other one.
Mature, you get the last word.
Thank you. I am part of the South Sudanese Foundation. We started at the church basement to help New American with their homeworks. Also, I'm part of the LIRS, stand for Lutheran Immigrant Refugee Resettlement Services. And I was lucky enough to be on that board at the time when the LSS closed. So to that, I persuade my board members, other colleague within that board, to set up a satellite office here. It's a national nonprofit that is based in Maryland. So they set up here in Fargo, and we were able to, this year alone, we resettled about 49 Afghans. And this year, we're hoping to bring in more Ukrainians and Congolese and many other New American or refugee across the world to Fargo-Moorhead.
Well, thank you. I'm going to invite Dr. Chan back up and have him conclude our time together.
Well, I hope you'll join me in just a word of gratitude to our panelists. Thank you all so much for a difficult set of questions, for taking on a difficult set of questions, and obviously there were more, as you could tell from the cues at the microphone, so our apologies that we couldn't accommodate all of them. But again, thank you so much for your voices and for lending your perspectives on these topics. Two brief announcements. If you would go to the next slide, please. We do have a podcast called Builders, and it features leaders who work in a whole bunch of different sectors, but who are building organizations, nonprofits, causes, and we interview them and ask them, in fact, many similar questions that Eric asked at the beginning about why this work is meaningful to you, what have you learned from the process of building. And my last announcement is to draw attention to our next event, which will happen on January 25th. You can go to the next slide. And we'll be featuring Catherine Finney with her talk, Build the Damn Thing. I'll let her explain. Catherine is the founder and CEO of Genius Guild and general partner of the Greenhouse Fund. Genius Guild is a business creation platform that uses the venture studio model to invest in Black entrepreneurs, building scalable businesses that serve Black communities and beyond. The $20 million Greenhouse Fund is a pre-seed venture fund that invests in market-based innovations that address racism. So she is a remarkable and dynamic speaker. This event is co-sponsored by the Black Student Union here at Concordia College. So just keep your eyes open on your email boxes, and you'll be seeing information about that soon. Again, everyone, thank you so much for your participation, and apologies for some of the delays on the front and the back end. Thanks, everyone.